guess then, Solo.
Yes, another one of those films bedevilled with reshoots and changes of director, but so in some ways it's surprising that Solo made its release date, and in some other ways quite obvious how it did. Alden Ehrenreich, I can never pronounce this. Alden Ehrenreich steps into the Han Solo role, and as we're introduced to him, already working for a local Corellian crime syndicate, but planning to escape the grimy underbelly to a better life off-world with girlfriend Kira, played by Emilia Clarke, sadly. This soon goes awry, with Han signing up for an Imperial flight school with Kira left behind. He vows to make enough money to buy a ship and return for her. Years later, washed out of the pilot programme for his rebellious streak, he's an infantryman who stumbles on Woody Harrelson's Beckett and his crew in the middle of a heist, and, after some twists, worms his way into their plans, escaping the Imperials along with former prisoner Chewbacca. They go on to stage a daring raid to nick some valuable fuel supplies, which goes disastrously thanks to some outside interference, leaving Beckett's former crew dead and reliant on Han and Chewie. He's also puzzlingly now deemed to be in debt to crime syndicate Crimson Dawn, so is hauled before Paul Bettany's Dryden Voss to explain himself. Beckett and Han, after some prompting, offer up an alternative, much riskier heist to make good, but they must take one of Voss's employees along for the trip. This turns out to be Kira. Shocker really. So off they go, but of course they need a ship, hence Lando Calrissian, played by Donald Glover, hence Millennium Falcon, and unfortunately hence his annoying robot co-pilot L337, voiced by Phoebe, I'm not saying elite.
Wait, L337?
Yes. They don't actually mention that in the film, but when you look at IMDb in the credits, yep,
it's that sort of film.
Get bent with that name.
And also some more outside interference, along with some deal changing and other miscellaneous double crossing and backstabbing. So Solo appears at an odd time for the Star Wars franchise. A vocal contingent vehemently hated The Last Jedi, which is their prerogative, and claim it was a commercial failure, which is an odd way to think of $1.3 billion box office. I'm not quite sure why this translated into talk of boycotting Solo, a completely different film from two completely different directors, co-written by the dude responsible for the most beloved installment, but no one's ever accused internet mobs of coherence. So, with Solo looking like it will claw its way to maybe $360 million as it shuffles out of cinemas worldwide, I'm sure they'll be happy to claim victory in their efforts to try and kill a franchise they say they love. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what the point was. I would, however, argue that, as with most Twitter storms, the wider world did not even hear of this drama, and instead didn't turn up because it sandwiched between more tentpoles than its usual Star Wars Christmas window, and, well, it has a fundamental hole in the marketing of this film because no one gives a goddamn about the origins of Han Solo. Solo's lovable rogue character in the original trilogy is straight out of the big book of character archetypes and is entirely self-describing.
Yes, and intentionally so.
Yes. Solo, then, is an answer to a question no one asked.
He's certainly one of the most lovable characters of the original trilogy, but he's not one of the most interesting.
Yeah, there's no need for a backstory here. And the backstory you get isn't particularly satisfying either. There's really no difference between the fresh-faced young Han you meet at the start of this film and the still fresh-faced young Han at the end of the film, making this a character arc with very few degrees in it. It's not like it's taking any risks in all the content either, and the things it chooses to flesh out are really weird. There's a throwaway line in the originals about Han winning the ship from Lando in a game of space poker, so here, of course, we spend 10 minutes or so in a scene about space poker, which is about as exciting as you'd expect a scene watching people playing cards would be, assuming you hadn't seen Casino Royale. However...
I'm assuming that all card games are about having cards and it's not missing all the nuance of bluffing and stuff, so they don't even understand card games.
If, however, you can get over the inherent pointlessness of it all, and bearing in mind this is Star Wars, it's not a stranger to inherent pointlessness, Solo feels much closer to the original trilogy than anything that's come after it. It is, for its faults, a light, breezy space opera with broad characters, a general sense of good humour with the odd action set piece thrown in, and that makes it a breath of fresh air in a series that's growing increasingly consumed by its own mythology, or if you prefer, spending too much time sniffing its own farts. Unfortunately, the least interesting part of this film is Solo himself. A lot of people blame Ehrenreich for this, which is a little unfair. I mean, he's in a completely unwinnable position. He's either going to be derided for doing a Harrison Ford impersonation or be derided for straying too far from Harrison Ford's take. So he's doing about as well as anyone can here, but there's just not that much for him to do. Kira, or perhaps Emilia Clarke, presents us with a mystery. In a universe where we've established that Space Paisley, or was it Space Renfrew, exists, certainly we've established that accents other than received pronunciation are possible, so how come on Corellia the grimy underworld characters cut about like they've just stumbled off the set of The Crown? I rather suspect the answer to this is that Clark has an acting range that can be measured in thousandths of a millimetre. But to be scrupulously
I'm
fair
glad
to
you
her,
went there.
in this film, she is terrible. Everyone else is pretty decent, though, although it would be a much more interesting film if it was focused on everyone else that wasn't these two guys. Donald Glover's eminently watchable, and Woody Harrelson and his crew are, for the short time we have with them, much more intriguing than our supposed stars. The dialogue is, I guess, better than other Star Wars films of late, and despite my repeated misgivings about the lead characters, it still turned out to be a fun enough little Star Wars outing that gratifyingly doesn't take itself anything like as seriously as the other Disney-backed outings. It's a shame that it's in a service of a story that's just not all that important to anyone, even it turns out Han Solo himself. It's an easy watch, it's an entertaining 2-hour diversion, but on reflection it does feel quite pointless, and that makes it hard to recommend the bother of dragging a family to the cinema to see this. Catch up with it at some point, but it's certainly not essential viewing for anyone.
Slammed.
That's actually more positive than most of my other Star Wars views. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I was going to say I found something else positive to say about A Quiet Place, in that it's got better dialogue than most of the other recent Star Wars films as well.
That's true.
All 3 lines of it.
It's not the most silent movies, Craig.
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually thoroughly enjoyed this. Perhaps part that comes out of simply not expecting to.
He's taken a knock on the head this month.
No, I mean, I think I probably enjoyed it as much as Scott, maybe slightly more. I mean, it's absolutely unnecessary, Scott's right, and it's throwaway, but I just found it kind of like a
That's all right, though.
fun
Yeah, I mean,
action film.
so was Star Wars.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Sometimes throwaway and fun is what you go to the cinema for.
Yeah, and Scott is so right that it's answering questions nobody asked, or if they did ask, they really ought not to be asking them. And like, it's something. I'm going to basically steal Scott's words from a conversation we had last week, I think. But they are. It's answering questions like, where did Han Solo get his distinctive gun? Well, who gives a?
And again,
It's Star Wars, Drew. Every nut and bolt has to be accounted for within 100 years of its recent history.
Yeah, but the thing is, right, that gun is only iconic because people like Star Wars and there's never been a gun like it. But there's never been any suggestion that in the universe of Star Wars there was anything
It's
special
anything
about that
special.
gun.
Yeah, it's like the Beretta of the Star Wars universe.
A Beretta 92F is exactly the opposite thing I was thinking of while watching this, Greg. Exactly.
and do you know what? It turns out that the story behind his iconic gun is he got it from someone else.
Yes.
Wow.
That's the thing Scott and I were talking about. It's like, I've never wondered, I never even thought about Han Solo's gun at all. Other than, yeah, okay, that's Han Solo's gun, I guess. But like,
But now the question is, where did Woody Harrelson get it from? I don't know the answer. We need another.
I would love it if this film just went out of its way to really annoy fans, and it opens with a scene with the character saying, "Wow, I really like that gun, Han. Where did you get it from?" And he turns around and they're in Han's room and he goes, "From this drawer." And he pulls the drawer open and there are just 100 identical guns in it. They were just here when I bought the place.
It's just a question nobody ought to be asking. And I thought, if I would have applied thought to the question of where did Han Solo get his gun, my answer would very quickly come, I don't know, Space Walmart?
One of those grabber machines down the arcade.
I'm going
It's
to
actually
guess.
a pretty bad gun, I'll be honest with you.
I'm going to guess if it's a gun, it probably came from a gun shop. I know I'm going way out there.
That's the thing with the Star Wars universe, though. Everything has to be inherited some way with an elaborate backstory. Nobody just buys anything from a catalogue.
And again, Scott, I'm stealing your words here because I liked your turn of phrase in this. You know, the idea of getting rid of Lord and Miller and bringing in Ron Howard again was to make it less goofy. You've got to wonder quite how goofy this was to begin with, because it's pretty
still
damn
pretty
goofy now.
That's the
for all-
point of Han Solo, though. He's goofy.
I probably liked the goofier bits better. I liked
Actually,
it when
yeah, I
it was,
probably did too.
I liked it when it was just spending minutes talking about Lando's impressive cloak collection.
Yes, that was funny. Or when he's the sort of self-important moment when Donald Glover's sitting there narrating his life story
Yeah.
for his book. Yeah, I mean,
What?
to be honest, I didn't have many issues with this film. Emilia Clarke is obviously terrible, but it's not Terminator Genesis terrible.
No, thankfully.
Thankfully, yes. the name of that robot is really stupid. That really bothered me. But I didn't find out until afterwards.
And this is my robotic best friend, M8.
I mean, it goes with the long tradition of really, really stupid Star Wars character names too, because there's Darth Father and Mon
Haram.
Calamari, the squid ring people who are fish, right? Although I think this film possibly takes the biscuit because there is a minor character who is in one of the card games, I believe, who is a sentient lobster whose name, right? You remember you're thinking lobster thermidor, the most famous lobster dish, right? Mm-hmm. The character name of said sentient lobster is Therm Scissor Punch. And when I first heard that a few months ago, I thought, I'm being punked here. This can't possibly be true. But it's true.
Scissor Punch. What are these people doing? What are they doing?
How many billions of dollars did they spend?
That got past the meeting stage. That got past the actors sitting at the table. Oh, I'm not reading for that. Give me peace. Therm Scissor Punch.
Yes.
Oh my God Almighty! They are neither wonder. Listen, that's the good thing about this, and then The Last Jedi, then, which I finally got round to watching. By the way, what an unremitting torrent of pish, and they really seem to be drawing the poison out of the fan base at the minute, do they not? But there you go, Therm Scissor Punch. Sounds not so much like a carefully thought out character name as an act of active trolling. Oh wow, that's amazing. Oh, I want to watch it now. I keep saying I've given up on Star Wars. Well, I'm cashing out of Star Wars now. I don't really have an interest in it anymore, but I always end up watching them.
I think, there are a number of things I would have... You're still thinking about Therm Scissor Punch, aren't you? Brother to the Mon Calamari. There are things I would have cut out of this film. Which I'll get to eventually.
That's so stupid.
Naturally.
I'm sorry. I'll turn my mic off.
Yeah, there's a few things I would have taken out, Scott. The creature that they find in the middle of that black hole, it struck me as being very like the Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a bigger monster sort of thing. It seemed unnecessary and in many ways awfully like the end of the Star Trek reboot.
Yeah.
Even visually.
I can see that, yeah.
Tandy Newton's character, I don't see what the point of that character was, given that what happens to her seemed to have A, no consequence, and B, what she did for the sake of a robbery seems incredibly pointless and stupid. I would have dropped that, but otherwise, it was just kind of a fun film. There's some fun moments. For the most part, the interaction between Woody Harrelson's crew is quite entertaining.
Yeah.
And it's so much less fan servicey than Rogue One.
Yeah, that's true.
There are some references, but if you don't know them, they just pass you by and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
And it is so much less on the nose and so much less fan service than Rogue One was. There's a revelation of a character towards the end, which completely confused me because I'm thinking, didn't that thing happen to that person in that other thing?
Yeah.
But apparently it's actually no, obviously stupidly because that person could possibly have survived, but it's explained a lot in the Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon and Star Wars Rebels cartoon. So it is explained, but if you don't follow that, which clearly I don't, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That makes no sense, but it's so minor and it's right at the end of the film, it's not a problem. The only other thing that bothered me is I enjoyed it pretty well. I thought it was a kind of fun film. It's no masterpiece by any means, but it has a lot more of the general kind of adventure feeling of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Than anything that's come since. The only thing that bothered me was that they made the Imperial March diegetic sound.
Yeah, that was a bit too goofy as well. That was perhaps more.
So basically, now, if assuming that Solo's canon, when Darth Vader appears in The Empire Strikes Back with the Imperial March playing, basically what you're saying is Darth Vader's music's now an advertising jingle.
Yeah.
That bothered me quite substantially, actually. But otherwise, yeah, it's a fun film and probably the best Star Wars film since Jedi.
Yeah, I agree, which is maybe more a condemnation of other Star Wars films than
Yes, that's
intense
possible.
praise for this one. But yeah, it's fun. I'm sure this will find its audience on home formats and will be reevaluated at that point. I think it's
They're not going to not make money back on it by the time home sales
Yeah,
and whatnot are in. Come
streaming
on.
and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it will, at the very least it will claw back its budget and its advertising. But it's,
It'll break even.
Yeah, and it's not really going to stop them making any more of these films. I mean,
Yeah.
this is how franchises work these days. It's the hope you get one or two big hits a year, and that goes.
Well,
for
that's the
title
thing.
flops.
It's not like every other one they've done so far hasn't made over $1 billion yet.
Yeah.
So okay, you've made one that hasn't. Get over it.
Yeah, and part of the problem also is that it's like Disney isn't making a lot of money on Solo because Disney was at the same time making all the money on Infinity War. So
Yeah.
you know they can't really have all of the money. Not all of the money.
No, just all of the most of the money.
Yes, this seems a perfectly cromulent theory.
Oh dear,
Financial
heart bleeds for
experts
them.
we
It
are.
really does.
Yeah, it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig.